Hello, everyone, and welcome to United Way. Live United. I'm Terry Westerfield. And joining me today, I have guest in from the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children. I want to welcome to the program Rebecca Rainey, who is the program director for the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
And thank you for bringing Shirley. Shirley Young heads up the Metro's, or she is the coordinator of the Metro's Medical Advocacy Program. Welcome, Shirley.
Hello.
For those of you who are tuning in, the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children, or it's sometimes called the Metro, is a community partner or partner agency of United Way of Southeast Louisiana. Now, its mission is to break the cycle of violence and aid survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault through advocacy, intervention, empowerment, and transformation. And ladies, that is a pretty tall mission. There is a lot to accomplish, but I think what I find most challenging about hearing that is the fact that you have to have that as a mission, that we have these kinds of problems that are in our community. Would you go so far as to say it's pervasive?
Yes, definitely, based on our 24-hour crisis line and the different types of calls that we get in, because they're not just strictly for family violence. And then the number of women that we have in our emergency shelter. At any given time, I believe about a month ago, we had 23 women and I think 11 children under the age of 9 in our shelter.
And a lot of times we always hear and we read the data that you may have 23 women, 9 children, but that is, quote, the tip of the iceberg, because so many have not left the circumstances under which they have become victimized.
Correct, yes. And many of them go back.
And why? We always hear that. Why do they go back? Is it fear of the unknown? Is it fear they can't make it on their own? Or have they just been, quite frankly, beaten down mentally and physically that they don't believe in themselves anymore?
Well, I mean, it's really case by case. A lot of them have, different struggles and obstacles that they would have leaving the situation. Sometimes it's maybe it wasn't that bad this time. Let's go back and see if we can work again. If there are kids involved, then there's the financial. Are the kids going to get taken away? Is it a cultural thing? There's a lot of shame involved when you bring that out. A lot of times domestic violence, maybe not everybody's intervening or doing anything about it, but a lot of the times your neighbors know, your families know. And then there's always those cases where nobody knows, and people are always very surprised.
And that's it. And again, because it can cross all societal, quote, boundaries.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, we have all ages, all educational levels, all races, religions, sexual identity, all kinds of things. It does not matter.
Well, and you've just brought up that the sexual identity and some of these things. When we think of often, let's put it this way, when you think of domestic abuse, you think of a woman being victimized, but it's not always by her partner, boyfriend, lover, husband, etc. It can happen in other ways that women can become traumatized and become victims of sexual situations. Mm-hmm. And Shirley, is that?
Yes, it's very common, and it's in the survivors I work with, I often see that they've been sexually abused as children, and then they go on to abusive relationships as adults.
So it's something that's almost, I don't want to say ingrained, but it's what they know.
That's true, that they don't know a healthy relationship. They don't know how to find one. They don't know how to build one. They might not even realize that they've been abused, and they need to learn about the dynamics of abuse in order to understand how they can change their lives.
Can we talk about that, ladies? Explain that. As again, I know you said, Rebecca, every situation is different, but aren't there usually sometimes, certain, let's say, identifiers or things that make you raise a flag and say, wait a minute, something's just not right here?
Yes, but I think women are often used to being told what to do and being under control of somebody else. Like at home, the father or the mother tells them what to do and may beat them to comply. So it's not so unusual for them to be in a relationship where they're told what to do, or and society has said, listen to your husband.
And it's not always the physical abuse. It's not always the women with the black eye and the broken ribs. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is the financial abuse. You have the isolation. checks being taken, money being loaded onto debit cards that the woman doesn't have access to. Isolating from friends, stalking has become a serious problem and issue. And it's one of the most dangerous aspects of a domestic violence relationship.
And we often hear about that too. It is whether or not, again, it's a husband, partner, lover, etc., that the stalking situation, I can remember my many years in news, and unfortunately there were a number of cases that were really big news stories here because of the folks who had been stalked. And unfortunately, when the man acted out, he not often took the life of the woman, but then killed himself. And on several occasions, there were children or others who just happened to be nearby who were also injured or killed.
Sure. Abuse affects everybody in the society in one way or another because we all have to pay for what happens.
How can you help someone that you suspect could be a victim and you want to turn them into a survivor? Because again, Rebecca, Shirley, you've said that this is something that often carries such an embarrassment factor or a societal kind of, ooh, you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to get it out, but it's coming out more and more. If you see warning signs, how can you or should you intervene?
Well, you can certainly say he shouldn't be treating you that way or she shouldn't be treating you that way and talk about what is a healthy relationship. And then there are services in the community, and a friend can tell a friend to call us or to call one of the other agencies that serves survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault.
I know one time, in fact, actually, doing some research for this and going online, there are a lot of safeguards that are put up because you want the information out there, but you want those who are being victimized to have access to it, but not their abusers. So there's some things that people, you're taking as safeguards as well to make sure that that doesn't happen, correct?
Yes. I think a lot of approach that we use is harm reduction. It's real easy to look on the outside and be like, oh, why are you with this guy? Get out of there. There's got to be places for you to go. A lot of times there aren't places to go, and it's just not that easy to up and leave. So one of the things that we look at is how can we make you a little bit safer? What things can we do? Whether it's, giving your neighbors an extra set of keys. Documentation is a huge thing. Social security cards, birth certificates, copies of your IDs. Have them in a safe place that you can have access to. Have a safe room in your house that you can go hide in if you need to, or at least get the children into that room. Because really, if somebody is involved in a domestic violence relationship and they might say, oh, well, it just happened that one time. 9 out of 10 times, it's just not that one time.
It's going to escalate.
Yeah. Or it has happened before, and they're trying to minimize it. So, we really want to just try and give them the tools and the education where they can go if it's, that immediate emergency shelter, services, and then just things that they can do on their own privately to keep themselves a little safer.
Now, is that where the crisis line comes in? Because I also know that another one of the United Way's partners is via Link 211. They can call that, but you also have a line, and you have other, I'm calling them kind of tentacles into the community.
Yes. We have the crisis line that's answered 24/7. And on the phone, they will get counseling about their situation. We'll listen to them to hear what's going on and ask questions about the danger of the situation so that we can point it out. And often when a woman starts saying things out loud about what's happening to her, she hears how bad it is. She realizes that this isn't normal. This isn't a good situation. This is a dangerous situation.
But that's where you have to find that inner strength to take that first step, whether it's make a call or go online or tell a friend, family member, etc., that the abuse is taking place.
Yes. And leaving is a process, and getting ready to leave is a process, just as it would be in an ordinary divorce. You have to go through changing your mind about what's going on and what you want out of your life.
Well, I know that Metropolitan Center for Women and Children, we've had others that we have partnered with many years, United Way, and this year kind of a statewide coalition came together at the legislature, and bills were introduced that are going to help women and children who find themselves in these problems, sometimes gaps in the law, et cetera, that were favoring men or giving them perhaps an opportunity to go ahead and again be close to the woman who is the object of, shall we say, their desire. And this is going to make the women safer. It's going to make waiting periods shorter for divorce. It's going to kind of come up with a federal code with some of the guns that are allowed and how long a man or woman may possess them after being charged and convicted of a felony. So there are a lot of things that are going on, but is it enough?
Well, it's certainly a help. It makes a difference. Some of my clients are very happy that they can get a divorce more quickly because that helps them to settle custody issues and selling the home and so forth, so they can get on their feet financially and put this terrible episode behind them.
I know that in working with the women and children, and I'm thinking of the abuse, but there's so many things that go with that. We talked a little bit about the crisis line and what happens there, but you do offer counseling, and that is integral to, as you said, getting women to, or men, because we often say just women, but men can be
and children.
Also, yes. But counseling is also a very important step in getting them, as you said, just sometimes talking about it, actually hearing your own story can set you, shall I say, free, or at least take you down that right road.
Yes, it really helps.
We offer the counseling we serve 8 different parishes. We have offices in 4 of them. So it's not only domestic violence, we also do a lot of sexual assault counseling, stalking, human trafficking, domestic violence. We also do groups. We provide services for children and caretakers of survivors of abuse. So we have a sexual assault group for women and children, a survivors group. We have a young teens group also for dating violence. And then we as the need arises, we'll form a group.
And what you've just said is such a broad spectrum. Rebecca, when you hear about children, again, all of this is horrific, but it's always quite hard to imagine that children have been violated in such a brutal way. And how does one reach out to children and help them break that, I guess you would say, cycle of abuse, so that because often you read that people who have been victims of abuse from when they were children on are most likely to be abusers themselves?
I mean, a lot of it is educating, also the parents, the communities. When you work with a young child that's a survivor, it's reteaching, reprogramming, depending on how long the abuse has been going on, who it was by, was it by a trusted family member, was it by a teacher, was it a stranger? I mean, again, everything is taken into consideration on the individual basis, and it is, like Shirley said, a very long process.
It's not that you just go in for a week or two. We're talking lifelong.
Yes.
And you also mentioned something, we talked briefly about the stalking, but wow. Stalking is something that I suspect that more of it goes on than we know about.
Well, yeah, and it's so much more advanced now than it used to be. I mean, with the technology, people being able to, steal others' identities. We had a young lady 2 months ago that came to us from Washington because she was fleeing somebody that was stalking her and very abusive, and he was tracking her Social Security number. So that was preventing her from working.
Ooh.
It was preventing her from getting a job, getting an apartment, in legitimate ways. So she ended up actually having to change her name and get a new Social Security number, which took, a very, very, very long time.
And what kinds of laws are there things that can be done to prevent this kind of stalking?
We have a stalking specialist that we work with, and she usually takes those. She's the expert on that. We refer the people to her, and we try to screen for stalking when we take those first calls, the crisis line calls, because it is a very dangerous situation. Men who stalk often go on to kill later.
And again, that they can follow someone across country, as you said, Rebecca, with what we have out there and all the computers we're surrounded by, and everybody seems to have a smartphone and everything else. You can find almost anything about anybody out there. It really is surprising, because I think we've all now and then Googled ourselves, and it just was surprised. You could find my house, my this, my that, whatever, things I didn't even remember about me, and a little bit kind of information overload, and I would imagine very frightening for someone who's trying to flee someone.
Yes.
And when somebody does get away and you can help them, as you said, it was a long process. We talked about kind of the mental process and the counseling, but surely if you're in charge, you're the advocacy for the medical program, is What does that entail? Are we talking physical here, or is again part of the mental and physical in the whole package?
That is, I train the medical advocates to accompany a woman or a man who's been raped or sexually assaulted at University Hospital. They have a SANE program, that's the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. And when someone comes into the hospital and says they've been sexually assaulted, they go to a special quiet room called the SAFE Center, that's Sexual Assault Forensic Exam Center. And it's set up like a little living room with a comfortable couch, and the nurse has her office there. And they do the rape kits there if the person would like that. And they're all eligible to have a medical advocate with them to support them, to explain what, to explain the process from when the event happened until going to court, if that's what they want to do, to report it. But they're not required to report to the police. They can go and have all the services without reporting to the police. And that's something that a lot of people don't know, and they also don't know that University Hospital is the only place they can go that has the SANE program. And that's very important because those SANE nurses are taught how to take evidence in a way that it can be used in court if there is evidence there. And that's so important because without evidence, they can't prosecute.
And then it can become almost a he said, she said type
Oh,
of
it's
thing.
often that. It's often that. And it's very difficult to prove a case, especially if it's someone that the woman knew and she previously had a relationship with him, but this time something happened, went wrong, and he raped her, and she has to say, no, I said no, but he kept going. So
now, with your program, are there the advocates? Are there volunteers who are trained, and you said nurses too?
the nurses aren't part of our program.
But
That's
I mean,
a
but
separate
they work
program.
in conjunction with each
Yes.
other. Mm-hmm. But do you have advocates? Do you need more advocates? Are they,
We
in a sense,
certainly-
on
yes.
24/7 call?
We do, and I also I'm part. The Metro is part of the multidisciplinary team with the Children's Advocacy Center for children who have been sexually abused or physically abused, and they told me that they get calls at night mostly for children, and they get 4 a day. So there's no way we don't have enough people to serve that population also. They have employees that do the same job during the day, but they don't have anybody for night.
You know, this sounds, to talk about this program, it sounds marvelous that it's there at University Hospital, but I'm thinking of all the other major hospitals in this region that don't have something like that. Is there anything in the works? Are they trying to come up with similar programs?
There's no funding right now. There's no funding at all for the SANE program. So they're volunteers. They are also working nurses in other hospitals, and they volunteer their time to be with that one person, and they can spend up to 8 hours with that one person. So it's invaluable. That's a very expensive but priceless thing that they're doing for the women who are there.
Now, is it because perhaps that, University Hospital has become the kind of modern day, the charity or the hospital where if there's been any kind of emergency care that's needed, is it because most would be transported to university where the focus is there?
The general public might not know that that's the place to go for sexual assault, and it's often, in my experience, the police that bring them there, and sometimes from other parishes too, because the SANE programs are very sparsely spread across the state. There are only a few, so it's a really important service, and it's not as strong as it needs to be.
And funding again. Now, this comes from the legislature. Is it state funding? Is it federal funding? Is it private public partnerships?
I'm not sure. The coordinator of the program told me that the funds that they had were frozen when the hospital went from being a state hospital to a private hospital, and until the legalities are worked out, they don't have access to the funds that they had. So they're asking for donations of things that they need for their patients.
Well, what are the kinds of things that they need? I know that I saw online that there was a list, and I know that for instance, United Way is a funder. You have other funding sources. There is never, quite honestly, folks, enough money in the world, it seems like, to fund all the programs that are so desperately needed in our region. But sometimes a little bit can go a long way, and it can be leveraged, whether you run it through our campaign, whether it's through and to Metropolitan Center for Women and Children. And I saw something here that was very interesting, and it was kind of a breakdown on how a donation can help. And $25 for school supplies for one child who lives in the shelter, $40 1 week of milk supply for the shelter, $85 food for one woman or child per week, and it goes on and on. And again, you can see where that amount, many of us, if we just gave up one of those fancy coffees we like to get every morning on the way to work, what we could do to help someone else in our community.
We do have very generous people that donate to us. Sometimes it's just random people that show up at the garage with, whether it's pajamas or underwear. It's little things that you wouldn't think would be so important, but pajamas, clean socks, and underwear is huge for the shelter.
And it's that because the women and children, when they often leave, it's just boom to get out of that situation.
Some just come in with a little grocery bag, that might have a pair of shoes and maybe a couple of pairs of underwear for their kids. But very rarely do you have people come in that were prepared to leave.
Because it had finally escalated to such a crisis situation, they really literally feared for their lives then.
Yes.
Wow. You brought up something earlier, too, and we're talking about, thank goodness there are survivors because of the resources that you have and you need more of. But you mentioned something earlier, and wow, it's human trafficking. I think so many of us think of that as something that happens in a far-off place, a foreign country somewhere, or you read about it in a novel, or you see about it in a TV show or a movie. But it goes on right here in New Orleans.
Yes, goes all up. As soon as you cross the state line, it's trafficking. And it's not just sex trafficking. There's a lot of labor trafficking that's going on, too. And
you help those folks as well?
We would. We did lose our grant. There's no grant in Louisiana for sex trafficking, but we do have services. We also have a shelter that we use in the West Bank if there was ever a need for it, just because it's a little bit more isolated and there's so much more involved when you get trafficking victims. You got FBI, you got ICE, all that stuff. But we've had cases, and a lot of women don't realize that they're being trafficked. I met this guy online and he invited me to come stay for a week, and then, he wanted me to do this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, that's trafficking. And then she's afraid because she thinks she broke the law by prostituting, so she doesn't want to tell, where this guy is or the other women that are there in the hotel strip, things like that. And that's scary.
They've been isolated and now they're fearful and become almost dependent upon the guy or whomever brought them or lured them here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of these guys, that are getting these women to cross state lines and, be in the hotels and do the trafficking, they're very skilled. They're very, very good at what they do. They're not kind of your stereotypical looking pimp, if you will.
Yeah, it can be Svengali-like or something. They can really...
Yeah. Like, I'm doing you the favor.
Wow.
So.
And that, it seems to me that's a woman who's just completely lost all self-esteem.
Yes.
Oof. And it's also frightening that we've often heard about major events that come to town, whether they be, sports or concerts or this or that. Pick one. That we see an uptick that this can happen.
Well, the
women
All-Star game.
And even men and even children.
Yeah, I think the NBA All-Star weekend, maybe close to 100 arrests, and it really didn't make that big of a news, but there were several arrests for that.
And how does one? Do you ever then help those who are trying to get free of a situation like that? How do you come into play? Do the police or in the different parishes contact you or say, wow, we think we've got a case of trafficking here. Can you help us?
I don't recall the last time that somebody actually came forward for help for trafficking. A lot of the times what happens is that it's a sting operation. We had a call a few weeks ago. There were some minors that they had found. Very rarely will you get somebody calling and saying, I'm a victim of human trafficking. I need to get out of the situation. I need some help.
I was going to say, then again, they're probably already, their head's not there to do that. Yeah,
it's such a dangerous situation.
Well, all these things, and there's so much help that these women and children need. Part of it, too, if you've gone through the process, and you talk about Shirley and the same program, and Rebecca, all the other things that are going on, it comes to a point where it seems to me it's going to culminate in court, legal actions, What happens there? How do you help? Because do you provide advocacy and information about that end of the thing as well?
We don't have legal advocates right now that go to court with people, but we have a lawyer that does temporary restraining orders that helps with that, and we make referrals to other legal systems, legal services.
So again, is this a volunteer basis of nonprofits and individuals coming together trying to help for the greater good?
And there's not enough help. There are many women who need a divorce or need help with custody, and they don't have money to pay a lawyer.
Well, if somebody is hearing this right now and they are an attorney and they want to help, what should they do? Is there a number they should call? Is there a, I know, again, it's hard to give out some of this information because of what you do, but should they contact, the crisis line and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm an attorney, I want to volunteer?
Yes.
Or if I'm a nurse, I hear this and I want to volunteer for the same program. Give that number. Let's give it a couple times, Rebecca.
504-837-5400.
Okay, I'm going to do as I do every program, say, wait a second, because right now people are scrambling to get that pen and paper. So again, Rebecca, please.
504-837-5400.
And there, again, just the need for so many. Run down the list of the kinds of volunteers or things, people that you need to help.
We always need volunteers for the crisis line, volunteers for our children's play groups, volunteers to help with, and it seems like it might not be that fulfilling, but it's extremely helpful to Metro, putting together our packets that we have for intakes for the children, the residential and the non-residential, helping with donations. I mean, sometimes we're just overflowing and we need to sort them, make sure they're appropriate.
And by that, again, we're not talking finances. We'd love that part, but we're talking about the clothes and toys and things like that. Yes. You can never be overflowing with the money.
No. We always need money. And then there's always something. I mean, it's a facility that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always something that could be done. Sometimes we have, a lot of women in the shelter that we only have it staffed by one person, that it's nice to have other people in there just to kind of hang out and talk and, maybe help with lunch or dinner or read their kids a book, help them out with some paperwork.
It gives them maybe a respite and also just a comfort level, I would think.
Yeah, and and the survivors, I mean, they like to talk, they like to hang out. If they're a lot of the times when they come to the shelter, they don't have jobs, they don't have school. It's kind of getting them, set up into a routine. We got to figure out where you're going to go from here. And any sort of positive contact that they can have with another adult.
And I was going to say, and if they don't have some of the skill sets they need, that's where the network of nonprofits comes in United Way and other partners that we have in the community, as does Metro, working together so maybe we can get them some kind of other assistance, whether it's to up their educational level or just skill set, or maybe childcare services so they can go to work, or different things to try to really put that person back together, make them whole again in the right way. Listen, I tell you, we're almost running out of time, ladies. So I was hoping that we could leave on a success story that maybe you could share with us, because I was online, I was looking at some of these, and I tell you, it was a tear-jerker, but kind of tears of happiness, some of the things that the women have written. And if there's something personal one of you might be able to share about one of your more recent success stories that you remember.
I can speak to a shelter story. We had a young lady and her 3 kids. I think one was 15, 9, and 3. They fled Mobile, Alabama, with nothing but the clothes on their back. They came to the shelter. She had really engaged her children in open, kind of positive dialogue about what had been going on and what their plan was and what they were going to do. And she came to the shelter and asked for help, took the help. She left the shelter, I think, 2 weeks ago with 2 jobs and housing through Unity, which has been fabulous to us.
Great
They're a great program that we work with.
And so the success is there, it can be there, but the first steps to anybody out there listening today is make the call, go online, use the resources that are available, and if you're not in need, help those who are.
Yes.
And one more time, give that number, Rebecca.
504-837-5400.
I want to thank you so much, Rebecca Rainey, the Program Director for Metropolitan Center for Women and Children, Shirley Young, who is the Coordinator of Metro's Medical Advocacy Program. And for United Way, I'm Terry Westerfield. Ladies, I hope you'll join me in saying, live united.